The blessing of life is good health, but when you don't get it all, you just have to be grateful. Joel, the CEO of a billion-dollar company, was battling a terminal disease. "Well, my days are numbered. I must leave well." He continued to be the kind-hearted man he has always been. Good people don't live long. He lamented to motivate himself while lying on his sickbed, trying to be strong. A maid came into the well-arranged standard room to care for her boss as she was paid. "Thank you for all you have done, Tina." "You are a nice man, sir, so I tend to put my best into taking care of you. Moreover, it's what I'm paid to do," she said with a friendly smile as she headed out of the room, driving Joel back into his thought. He has not seen his wife in days now, and she is comfortable with it. Another idea came through as he concluded she might be busy. He was busy with his belief that he didn't notice Tina was back to the room with his food to feed him. He rose when he was finally revived, and he took the food as he chatted comfortably with her, complimenting her beauty and appreciating her. She took the compliments and cleaned him up after feeding him, laying him down as he had lost almost all his organs to cancer. The sickness started 4 years earlier when he felt uneasy, and he went to visit his doctor, who conducted a test on him and broke the news. Joel was shocked, because he was conscious of his health and never believed he could ever be in that condition. He has tried everything he could so that he would survive, but there has been no cure for the illness. His money kept him for this long until the doctor predicted he had 6 months to live. He has, from that time, been depressed and tried so hard to live the best of his life as if that was not enough. Now he could no longer walk for himself anymore, and just a few weeks back, he was almost gone until he was revived by the scream of his maid, who was already crying profusely. He thought about all his life. He was a very hard-working man, trying all his best to succeed, which he did, but not after facing a lot of challenges on his way up. He felt he was just so unlucky because he had hoped to live long enough, and maybe by then his wealth would be noticeable in the world. He looked around and wept silently. "Life is so unfair," he commented, talking to nobody in particular. Tina has been his only companion since everything started. His wife has not been there to care for him. She seemed so much more interested in his properties than taking care of the property owner. It annoyed him sometimes, but he has learned to calm his nerves as nothing lasts forever, and he does not even love an exception here. There was something about Tina that had always attracted him to her. He was unsure, but as much as he knew, Tina was a lovely, kind, caring, and intelligent young lady. She is still young and has a lot of potential. He just couldn't place it well as he occasionally thought about her. She was the only person that went out of her way just to see him smile. The wife, on the other hand, Miss Catherine, is a fashion freak. She loved expensive and flashy things ahead and had a high taste for everything. She took over her husband's company ever since he became sick. She has since then changed a lot. She didn't have a child of her own and was never a supporter of adoption. She believed she was living her best life, as advised by her friends. When she first heard about her husband's illness, she spent lavishly and had young boys for her sexual satisfaction. She has failed to bring in more projects for the company's development. Joel knew he was not the best. He could leave the company, but he had no choice, as she was his wife. He hoped for a miracle, though. Joel laughed at his wrecked conclusion as he struggled to turn to the other side of the bed. He rang the bell to summon Tina, who was always at his service. He just decided he would ask about her family for the first time. He just wanted the day to end well. He sighed softly. She came in almost immediately with her angelic smile as always. They began their conversation, and the name Jessica was constant during the conversation. That was Tina's mom. Tina explains her situation worsened due to her father not being responsible, and she doesn't even want to know him due to the hardship and struggles he has made her and her mom go through. Joel tried hard to remember why that name sounded so familiar until he realized where that was coming from. Jessica was Joel's lover at the university. Everybody had always considered them the best couple on campus until she became pregnant for him and he told her to go for an abortion, or that would be the end of their good relationship, as he didn't want any child at the moment because of his education. Jessica had to drop out of school because her parents were such a disappointer and decided she would not continue her education. He had not seen her since then, and he believed something terrible must have happened to her as she had not heard from her after his university days. He thought that he had always believed that something was different about Tina, but he never knew it could turn out to be like this. He regretted his actions. How mysterious could karma catch up with someone in the least expected way? He couldn't help but cry, and when he finally got to say something, he could only tell Tina he was sorry. She was surprised, as she didn't know why her boss was so moved by her story. It would be so wrong of him to try and hide the truth from her now, since he was going to be gone soon. He summoned all courage and looked Tina in the eyes from his dying bed and broke the shocking news to her. "Tina, I might be your father. Your story makes me remember my youthful days. I think I know your mother, and I think you might be my daughter." She was shocked that she had almost lost her stance. She looked at Joel in disbelief as tears ran down her cheeks. She had vowed to curse the man who abandoned her mom and made her live a miserable life, unknown to her that she had been taking care of him with sincerity and love. The atmosphere was filled with negativity. She could comprehend the situation. She stormed out of the room with just one statement running through her mind. "This cannot be true." To clear his doubts, Joel summoned his doctor for a DNA test. He begged Tina to surrender herself for a medical examination, and the result was out after some days. To his relief, the result had it that Tina was his daughter. Joel was the happiest man on the planet Earth. This meant a whole lot to him. He was not going to die barren. All this while, his wife was away from him. She didn't even care to know how good or bad his situation had grown. She was waiting for him to die so she could legally take charge of the company. She had always imagined being the next CEO of real estate. She didn't get the news of Joel getting back his daughter, as it was something he never spoke to her about when she came back home. She sipped her wine as she surfed through her e-commerce market, trying to purchase an expensive watch for one of her lovers. Clinton is Joel's legal advisor and also a perfect friend. They have been together for a while, and the relationship has been enjoyable. Joel informed Clinton about the new development as regards the order of his will. Getting a call like this from his client was surprising, and he felt he should see things himself. He went over to Joel's beautiful mansion. After a series of questioning and comprehensive looks into the situation, Clint did not doubt that Joel's mind was made up and would respect his decision. He gave Tina this lucky girl look as he was equally happy for her. Joel changed his will. In the new will, he willed all Joel's possessions to his only child, as Joel had ordered. Joel believed so much in Tina. He trusted her to handle everything well and make the family name great. He thought she had a lot of hidden potential, even though she had only served as his maid. The news soon traveled fast, as Dr. Smith, who was also a friend to Miss Catherine, who always helped her to conduct a series of abortions, was the one who led the DNA test. Dr. Smith made a copy of the DNA result and sent it to Miss Catherine. When she got the result and discovered her husband had a child, she flew up, and her eyes widened in disbelief as she picked up her purse and phone. She was not going to take this. How could he not tell her about this after all these years together? She shook her head, opened the door to her car, and immediately sped off home. Joel's last days were filled with joy, as he had already asked his daughter for forgiveness, and she was assured he had forgiven him. She didn't stop caring for him as she was fond of him from the beginning. Miss Catherine rushed into the house and straight into her husband's room. She dashed in and saw Joel and the maid smiling and talking happily. She could not take it as she poured out her mind bitterly. She was so angry that she mistakenly hit Joel in the chest. Joel developed convulsions almost immediately and was rushed to the hospital by Tina and Miss Catherine. The doctors did their best to revive him, and he was again so lucky to cheat death. However, he was still conscious. Miss Catherine was busy outside, threatening to deal with Tina. After a long wait, Joel was finally stabilized and allowed to talk to his wife and Tina. Joel was so sure his days were almost over. He held Tina's hands and whispered something into her ear. Afterwards, his pulse went flat. Miss Catherine left the ward silently as she cried softly. Tina could not have it. She also wept profusely as the nurses escorted her out of the room. Months after the tragic death of Joel, Miss Catherine instructed Tina to stay away from her as she was never going to recognize her as relevant in the family. She has also taken full ownership of the company. When the time was right, Clinton called on both sides and dropped the bomb. As if that was not enough, Joel gave all his houses to Tina, and Miss Catherine was left with nothing. Miss Catherine was not only disappointed, but bewildered. She threatened to sue Clinton and take the matter to court, as she believed that she could not be the will her husband left. She got into her car and zoomed off at the highest speed possible, looking for a spot to cool off her head. She was lost in the reality that she didn't notice the truck in front of her. She hit the car and became unconscious immediately. The accident claimed her legs. She also became mentally unstable from the hit on the steering wheel. Tina has been doing her best to prepare for the first day in the office. She knew it would not be easy, but she knew she had all it took to take a company to a higher position. She looked back at everything that had happened in a few months and believed she was the luckiest person on earth, as anybody would believe. She realized patience is a virtue, and being kind was its best compliment. Imagine she wasn't kind to Joel. They might never have had that conversation. Patience is not the ability to wait, but how one acts while waiting. It's good to be good, she said as she stepped out of her car and headed towards the company door majestically with a bright smile.
His single mother raised Dan because his father divorced his mom and left them when he was just 3 months old, for reasons unknown to him. Han, Dan's mother, was optimistic that her husband, Dan's father, would return until she received the worst news of her life. She was at work when a colleague told her Dan's father had remarried. That must have been why he divorced. It was because just a few months after he left for no reason, he had moved on. He must have been seeing the other woman all along. Ever since then, Han didn't remarry. The decision wasn't all planned out, though, because she only thought to remain single for a very few years, until Dan would be mature enough to take care of himself and his potential half-siblings. So she dedicated her whole time to working to provide for their needs. Significantly, the basics: food, clothes, and shelter. Mrs. Han was working hard and could be categorized under the upper middle class in her city. In other words, they were average citizens who were not satisfied, but as well not starving. Mrs. Han's perception and decision about remarrying, once Dan reaches his adolescence stage, didn't take long before it changed. This is due to her stories about her step-parents, which worsen daily. These stories are, of course, unpleasant and often harmful. If it's not news of a stepfather maltreating and physically abusing his stepchild, it would be that of a stepmother harassing her stepchild. All of this news together didn't encourage her to settle down with any other man, as she didn't want anyone to ill-treat her dear son. This continued for years as she didn't give any man a chance. When Dan was 10, he used to come back late from school, as he was preparing for his high school examination, leaving Han lonely as there was no one to chit-chat to or gist unimportant topics during the day. And by night, Dan ate and goes to bed to prepare for the next day. He gets home exhausted and sleeps off without eating dinner. Han, on the other hand, closes around 2 p.m., and she has no close friends except for a few colleagues who are casual friends. She only enjoys Dan's company and doesn't like it when anyone pries into their privacy, not even the neighbor next door. She got tired at some point. Watching a movie would have been a great escape from boredom, but she's terrible at it. She practically dozes off each time she watches a movie, drooling all over the place, and often Dan makes jest of her. So she stopped seeing movies as she concluded that it wasn't her thing. The boredom reached its peak, and she became a game lover. She sensed that as an excellent means to keep herself busy, but it didn't work long. Out of loneliness, she decided to try some dinner dates, even though she had decided not to date anymore. She only wanted to pass the time. Han was 39 and would be clocking 40 in a few months, but I guess she was still attractive and radiant as men didn't stop chasing after her. No doubt, Han is a beautiful woman. She looked so tender and young, even younger than her age, that many mistakes her for being in her late 20s. Probably because she eats good food and a lot of fruit, some men find it difficult to believe she truly has a son. Instead, they think she claimed to avoid dating men. Instead, they think she claimed that to avoid dating them. At times, she gets frustrated and gets out of her way to prove herself, showing them Dan's pictures on her phone so they could believe her. Of all the things, she never welcomed any man into her house because she didn't know what Dan would think of her. She instead sees these men during the day, but never flirts with any and turns down their offers when they ask her out on a date. Change is constant, they say. Han started going on dates. She could go on a few, but the last one made her stop. She did not mind hugging her loneliness with her whole arms. She met this guy online, and he asked her out on a date, and she agreed. The location wasn't far from home, so it was more accessible for her to head home quickly before Dan got back, because he got back around 7:45 p.m. every day. The date was scheduled for 6 p.m. Han had been there around that time, but the new guy didn't reach there until some minutes past 7 p.m. While he went, he apologized for coming late. Han said it was okay, but she wouldn't be staying long since she had waited for over an hour and her son would soon be back from school. "You have a damn son?" the guy asked. Han nodded in affirmation. Han must have forgotten to mention it during their chats, because she doesn't hesitate to tell every guy she meets, but in this case, she and the new guy had only known for a few days, and everything happened so fast. The guy didn't listen to her. He flared up and called her unprintable names for not informing him earlier, as he doesn't do single mothers. When Han was about to explain why she hadn't mentioned it, the guy hurled curses at her and her son and walked out on her. Han felt so embarrassed as she left the location crying. She was more pained that she couldn't defend her innocent son in the presence of that ill-mannered guy. That made her conclude to resume her everyday life, irrespective of the level of loneliness she encounters. After some weeks to keep herself focused, she started working as a freelancer online, as she was a professional website designer. This became their everyday lives. Han didn't remarry, but could take care of herself and Dan with her little earnings, and they lived fine. Han ensured her son wasn't intimidated by his colleagues, especially for not having his father around. She tried to get him virtually everything he asked for, and made sure he attended the best university in the city, even if she had to struggle to pay his tuition. 15 years later, Dan was done with school and started working. He lives a vivid life, works in a reputable organization, and earns excellent money. He has a girlfriend, Tilda, and a best friend, Tony, who lives with him. He was staying in a different state from where he grew up. Dan feeds and clothes them, and every week they go to parties where he lavishes money on drinks. On a fateful day, Han called her son for some financial help, as she needed to pay for her rent. But Dan turned her down, claiming that he was broke, but she should call after a week. After 1 week, Han called her son again, since he had promised her, but he said he had been tight and exhausting and claimed he was busy. He told her to call back after 3 days. Han didn't hesitate to call back, as she needed the money for rent badly. This time, Dan stopped picking up his mom's calls. At this point, the mom observed he's been lying all along, because she knows he earns considerably every month. She doesn't know where he stays. Maybe she would even have confronted him physically. When Han could not pay her rent, she was kicked out of the house. She wasn't allowed to pick a pen, as she was threatened with being arrested. She had no friends, as her only companion is her son, who suddenly turns against her. The son has stopped picking up her calls, and she has no family in the city. Han has stopped working for a while now, but she was able to gather her remaining little pension and savings to rent a stuffy single room. She has no mattress, pillow, or possessions except for 2 clothes and a wrapper. She sleeps on the floor, wearing one cloth, while she lies on her wrapper every night, and every morning she washes her clothes to wear at night. Feeding was difficult, as she only ate once a day, often in the afternoon, because she had to manage the money she had left. Sooner than expected, Karma visited Dan as he fell sick. It was a severe illness. Tilda and Tony had rushed him to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with some weird defect in his body system. Hence, surgery was the only solution. He has the money to pay for his surgery. Still, the straw that broke the camel's back was part of the blood replacement, as he needed a blood transfusion from a donor that matched his own immediately after the surgery, as he would have lost a lot of blood during the surgery. It was urgent, so he summoned Tilda, his girlfriend, for a donor test. But she said she would come later, and before Dan could say another word, she had cut the call. Immediately Dan called Tony, severally, but he didn't pick up, and when he eventually did, he claimed he was busy and will come later. Dan was so disappointed, but more uneasy, as his pains persisted. He later thought of his mom and called her. The mom, hearing his voice over the phone, figured out that something was wrong with her son. Dan explained himself, and Han immediately asked for the hospital's address. She needed money to travel down. So she ran to the street to beg for money so she could reach there on time. After some hours, she accumulated cash and traveled to meet her son. Dan's case had worsened, and it seemed like he would die soon. The mom had compassion for her son and asked them to run a test. Fortunately, her blood matched, and the transfusion procedures began. It was a success, as both Dan and his mother were okay. Dan regretted his evil actions. He sobbed bitterly as he pleaded for his mom's forgiveness, blaming his stupidity and devilish friends. The mother also cried, forgave him, and after 3 days they were discharged. Dan chased Tilda and Tony out of his house and begged his mother to move in with him, as he had 3 flats. He promised not ever to forsake her. Han was happy again, and they lived in the same compound happily ever after. This story shows that the impacts of mothers cannot be sidelined now or ever. They are rare gems and are small gods. A mother will always come through, regardless of her child's shortcomings. Hence, as a child, you must love your mother, irrespective of her flaws. No friend, platonic, casual, close, or best friend, can make up for the role of a mother. Place no friend above your mother. As kids, we must always take care of our mother, and do not wait for the right time, as there is no such thing as the right time in this case. Don't wait till you start working or earning big. Don't wait till you start driving your dream car. As a kid, you can take care of your mom by helping out in the kitchen. It's not about money or life's achievements, but the act of responsibility. Take care of your mom by being there when they need you. Not everyone will get a second chance like Dan.
Rose was always sure not to jump to conclusions. One winter evening, she was returning home a little later than usual. It was snowing softly, and the ground temperature was cold enough for the snow to stick. Rose stopped, adjusting the fur hood on her coat, and overheard a conversation at the nearby bakery. "Get out of here! I'm telling you, I won't give you anything," Rose heard someone inside the bakery say. "Ma'am, I haven't eaten in a couple of days. I'd like hot water and a bun." "It's cold, ma'am," said another voice outside the bakery. Rose followed the voices and saw a salesman chasing an unkempt man away from the shop. The man was hunched over and quietly begging for food. Rose waited until the man, who had a disappointed look on his face, left before she stepped into the bakery. "Ma'am, give me some food," she ordered. Rose bought some pastries and hot tea. She left the shop and saw the man from earlier sitting on the frozen bench. He looked at her with such gratitude. "You know," he said as he drank his tea and started to warm up, "you're the first person in days to help me." He continued, "People are afraid of poverty, afraid to help. They avoid those who are different from them. I was rich. People would come to me and request things. But it so happened that I am here now. I'm eating the buns that you bought. So light, so kind. I see that you have had something nagging at you for a long time, but do not forget the man winked. "Everything will be fine. You helped me and did not turn away at a difficult hour, and I will help you. Don't ask how, just help me now." Rose got up from the bench. She was so warm and good. The anxiety was gone. The man smiled again and stood too. "Farewell, my good fairy, and await good news for your kindness." Rose felt the man was telling the truth. Soon she understood it exactly. "Congratulations, it's a boy!" This was the phrase John dreamed of hearing for 10 years. He and his wife wanted a baby, but it didn't work out. Today it happened, and John was the happiest man in the world. "When can I see my wife and son?" he asked the nurse. "You can come in now," the nurse replied. John walked into the hospital, but it felt like he had flown into it on wings of happiness and immense gratitude. "Rosie, I love you very much. Thank you for giving us a son." Rose was lying on the chair, and the baby was on her chest. She was crying with happiness. John bent down to kiss his newborn son and saw that he had a birthmark shaped like a tiny hand. "Rose," he said, holding the baby out toward Rose, "did you see?" Of course, she smiled. He didn't know how to ask or tell his wife that the baby had a birthmark on his forehead. "There's a spot on his forehead. Is that okay?" John said. "Birthmark at birth. Did you know they are a mark from God?" "Of course I did, but I didn't think my son would have that mark," John replied. "Does it bother you?" Rose asked. John was trying to find the right words, but he was distraught. "I like it," he said finally. "It's a peculiar speck like God touched his forehead with an ink pen. The doctors say it's a very rare mark and means our son will be brilliant and capable," Rose explained. The doctors won't say anything to make Mom feel bad, thought John, but he didn't say anything aloud. "Do you have a problem with that?" "No, it's okay. Just out of the blue somehow. You know, I don't care where the birthmark is. For me, the main thing is that he is healthy in all respects. We have dreamed of a child for so many years, so who cares if he has a birthmark or not?" Rose said. John understood that his wife was right. It's not such a terrible defect that could interfere with the child's full life. He needs time to get used to it. "I'm sorry, you're right," he said to his wife. "I was a bit surprised. I didn't care if he had a birthmark. The important thing is that he's healthy, and so are you." He kissed his wife. "I'm going home to get ready for you and our son to come home. If you need anything, tell me, and I'll bring it to you." "No, I don't need anything, thank you. Now I have everything I wanted." 3 days later, John came to pick up Rose and his son from the hospital. There were no other visitors, and they decided to invite their family over once Mom and baby adapted to the new rhythm of life. Life was flowing in a different direction. The baby required a lot of attention and effort. Rose was very tired because, at age 37, it was challenging to become a mother for the first time. John helped his wife as much as he could, and he often got up in the middle of the night to give his wife a chance to sleep. After a week of adaptation, Rose invited over her best friend, Anna, who she planned to be her son's godmother. When Anna came bearing gifts for the newborn, she was genuinely happy for a friend who had waited so long for this happy moment in life. But when she saw the boy, she was surprised. "Rosie, what's that on his forehead?" Anna asked. "It's a birthmark," Rose answered calmly. "Can't you remove it?" Anna said. "Why?" Rose was genuinely surprised. "It doesn't bother me or John." "I don't know. It's going to grow as he does and become huge." Anna was trying to find the right words. "It would be ugly, and the kids would tease him at school, you know." "No, I don't. It all depends on how he treats this birthmark. If he likes it and thinks it's unique, he won't be afraid of being teased." "I don't know. If it were my kid, I'd have it removed," Anna said. "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to remove it for him. You can't do that after all. It's not a wart. It's a birthmark. Birthmarks don't just appear on your body." Rose was offended. Let's wait until Adam's old enough to decide what's best for him." Rose was getting angry. She didn't want to talk about it. Anna noticed it and decided to finish her visit. "I think I'll go. I have to go to the clinic, and I completely forgot." "Run, of course. I have a lot of chores to do. I have to do my chores while Adam sleeps." Her friend left, but Rose still felt nasty in her soul. Why did she worry so much about this birthmark? It was quite small and looked fine. She seemed a little weird, thought Rose, and continued her business. There was a family visit planned for the weekend. Rose and John's parents, his sibling with his wife and daughter, and Rose's sister with her husband and children were due to come. She was looking forward to their arrival. She had a great relationship with her father-in-law and her brother-in-law, and she was always delighted to see them. Rose was on good terms with her family, at least until today. On Friday, John took a day off from work to babysit while Rose went shopping and prepared treats for her family. Unlike Rose, John was not so relaxed and was not particularly happy with his family. He knew perfectly well that relatives on both sides would ask many questions about his son's appearance. Knowing his relatives and his wife well, he was sure that no one would speak with caution. Everyone could afford to say exactly what they think about their families, so he wanted to prepare his wife for possible negative comments, but did not know how to do it. Rose came back from the store with huge bags and started cooking. Adam was sleeping well, and John decided this was the right time to talk. "Rosie, are you ready for the next of kin?" "Of course. I'm looking forward to their arrival. I miss everyone, and we rarely see each other. Imagine how happy they are for us." His wife's benevolence and naivete always surprised John. He did not intend to re-educate his wife because he did not see the point. He was not sure of the effectiveness of the idea. In the morning, Rose woke at dawn. She was eager to show her little bundle of joy to the people closest to her. Rose's parents were the first to arrive. Even though they had become grandparents for the third time, they were pleased because the eldest daughter had 2 girls, so they had 2 granddaughters. Rose's father always wanted a grandson. The grandparents leaned over to his crib to see Adam sleeping peacefully as they entered the room. They immediately recoiled as if they had seen a wild animal instead of a child. "Rose, what's that on his face?" they asked. "Birthmark. Isn't it cute?" said Rose naively. The parents immediately left the room and headed for the kitchen. John was tense about the unpleasant conversation. "Can't it be removed?" asked his father. "Why?" Rose was genuinely surprised. "Why, this is a nightmare. The child has such a mess on his face." Rose was in tears. John understood his wife's condition perfectly. She wanted her family to be happy with them, but it didn't work. "It's not gross. It's God's mark, Dad," Rose cried. "Look, why couldn't he have that mark on his back or some other part of his face?" her father said. "Did I cause this?" Rose wondered again. "God blessed it. I didn't know my daughter was such a believer." Her father was surprised. "You know, Dad, when you wait so long for a baby and ask for it from a higher power, you'll believe in everything and everyone. And what is the actual problem? You do not like your grandson?" Her parents looked at each other. It was clear that they did not consider the grandson. They saw the birthmark and immediately left the nursery. "I think I like it," she said. But her father said, "Not so much. We didn't get a good look at it." "So, you got a good look at it, but not at the child?" Rose started to get excited and the doorbell rang. Her sister and her husband and 2 daughters arrived. The girls were young, one 8 years old and the other 7. They immediately ran to look at their new cousin. No one told them he was so small and not to scream. Naturally, they woke Adam with their screams. John gestured to Rose that she should tend to the guests and that he would look after his son. Rose met her sister, who congratulated her younger sister on the long-awaited arrival of an heir and went to the nursery. She came out exactly 2 minutes later with the same look. Rose was getting angry. I don't understand why you're unhappy. It's my kid, with or without birthmark. I don't care. I love him. I've waited 10 long years for him, and for John and me, the most important thing is that he's healthy. John's parents and brother and family came. First they hugged. They congratulated the young parents on the birth of their son, and then went to the nursery and rushed out of there, saying they did not want to wake the sleeping baby. But Rose saw that these cousins didn't like the mark on the baby's face either. John knew it was time to get into the conversation before his wife had a nervous breakdown. The family was in the kitchen, and the kids were sent to Rose and John's room, so the adults could talk privately. The family meeting was complete. "My dear family," said John solemnly, "we understand that you were surprised by the appearance of our son. Yeah, the guy has a birthmark on his forehead, but firstly, it's a tiny birthmark, and secondly, it's not a physical defect that could prevent him from fully living and developing. We sincerely do not understand your reaction and ask you to keep your emotions, especially your comments, to yourself." Everyone looked at John silently. Rose looked at her husband with great gratitude. John's father was the first to break the silence. "Guys, we're happy for you. We just didn't expect the boy to be born." He was thinking about how to word it. "To be born special." "Dad, a special baby is different. So that you know, Adam was born entirely healthy. Let's just change the subject." "Well, not unique, not like the others. Can you do plastic surgery to eliminate this defect?" And then John lost his nerve. "What defect?" he shouted. "I told you it's not a defect, just a birthmark. You have that on your back and your arm. Why didn't you do any plastic surgery? Fix these defects." "So it's on his back and hand, not on his face." His father doesn't want to give up. "I have a cosmetologist I know. I will talk to her and find out what can be done." Rose couldn't take it anymore. "That's it. I've had enough. Thank you all so much for the congratulations and the gifts, but that's it. We realized that you aren't pleased with his arrival. I am tired and I want to relax. Goodbye," she said and turned around and went to the nursery. John sent the guests away and went to his wife. Rose, of course, was crying, sitting by her son's crib. "Honey, don't listen to them. We'll see how happy they are with our Adam's achievements." John tried to calm his wife. "You know, I wish we hadn't invited them and kept them away from the baby. We've spoiled the mood." She leaned down to her crib and quietly said to her son, "I know for a fact that you're going to show everyone how smart you are, and they're going to be embarrassed by their poor attitude." Time passed, and Adam grew up. At age 15, he graduated as an extern and entered university. He knew 6 foreign languages, was a professional swimmer, and was the winner of many sports competitions and intellectual quizzes. His parents were happy. His whole extended family watched Adam's achievements with surprise. But the most exciting thing is that the birthmark on the boy's forehead, which so concerned all the relatives, remained tiny and was almost unnoticed under his haircut as he grew up. The story of Adam resembled the tale of the ugly duckling, and the result was the same. Now grandparents on both sides praised their only grandson and were proud of his success. John's parents were doubly pleased because the boy had carried on their family name. John and Rose looked at their loved ones and wondered how they could be such hypocrites. Now, not only did Adam's birthmark not alienate his kin, but it did draw attention to him. They didn't think they were like everyone else, so they told their parents to get rid of the mark. Adam is 16 years old today. Rose and John have decided not to have a sit-down with relatives, but to take the child they had long dreamed of to San Francisco. Sitting on the plane, John asked Adam if he regretted that his parents had not given him a real family celebration. "Dad, my family is you and Mom. It is clear that there are grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, but I am more comfortable with you. I am fortunate that you were like that. Other kids have a complicated relationship with their parents and often complain about misunderstanding their relatives," Adam said. "Yes, they unfortunately don't choose their family," John said thoughtfully. "But it's not worth giving them up, my family." Rose looked at her son with adoration. After all, he is a brilliant child. Of course, my good man, I agree with you. This is your party, and you decide how it's going to be. And Dad and I will always be there for you. And we will always be there for you because parents have to support and protect their children in all situations. She thought for a second and went on. And from any attack. And said relatively quietly, even from close relatives.
Muffin arrived at the school later than the others. She was undergoing a challenging course of treatment. For several years, was homeschooled. By this time, the children at the school had managed to become friends. The class developed their relationship, and the first love couples appeared. Brian was in love with Emma and sometimes walked her home. Paul was inseparable from Anna. Steve spent a long time unsuccessfully courting the class's top hottie, Sophia. However, all the boys loved Sophia, even from other classes. She was beautiful, blonde, with green eyes. Sophia was not very successful in her studies, although she was very successful with the boys. She was the recognized queen of the class. On that day, 2 students, Muffin and Fred Crane, came to the school. Fred immediately attracted the attention of the entire class. A humble guy with dark hair and a friendly smile, whom both teachers and girls and even boys liked. He was well-versed in all the lessons, was polite, friendly, and did not participate in conflicts. He treated all warmly and affably. Surprisingly, he did not pay much attention to the beautiful Sophia. The queen of the class is accustomed to the increased awareness of boys. She wondered why the new Fred was friendly to Lisa, Stephanie, and Judy. He treated Sophia like everyone else, warm, kind, and nothing more. In the beginning, Muffin didn't even attract the students' attention. Everyone was busy discussing Fred's appearance and preparing for Stephanie's party. Muffin was sitting next to Fred. 2 new students sat together, but did not pay attention to each other. It is not surprising that no one remembered Muffin. No one knew her name, although teachers approached her. A lumbering body, fat legs, thick cheeks, and colorless hair. That's what the new girl looks like. She didn't bother anyone, answered the teacher's questions, and didn't talk to anyone. The nickname, Muffin, stuck to her at once. No one remembered that the colorless girl was called Heather. She did not interest anyone. Soon it turned out that Heather had unpleasant breathing. When she was anxious or rushing, she began to breathe unnaturally. The girl put a tube in her mouth during the attack, restoring her breath. This caused her to be squeamish. She was called a muffin because of her loose body and plump face. At first, everyone was indifferent to her. Her classmates simply did not notice her. The situation escalated when it became clear that Fred was sympathetic to Heather. No, he was not in love with her. It was impossible to fall in love with a loose, colorless creature with unpleasant breath. But he treated her well. The girl could easily share her school supplies if Fred didn't hear the assignment. Some topics that Heather didn't understand, Fred could explain to her. It wasn't friendship, but relations with her desk mates were good. The beginning of the feud was Sophia. A pretty girl in the class could not forgive an ordinary girl for the attention of a good guy. One day, Sophia offered Fred to sit next to her in class, but the guy refused. He politely replied that he had arranged with Heather to do a joint project. Beauty harbored evil. From that moment on, Heather was no longer just an unremarkable girl. She became the true enemy of the class queen. You can't say that Sophia was madly in love with Fred, but the friendly guy turned out to be inaccessible to her. He was not under the spell of the beauty. He communicated with Sophia just as he talked to Stephanie, Anna, Emma, and even Muffin. One day, the first unpleasant situation occurred. That day, Sophia was in a perfect mood. She was wearing a bright red sweater and blue jeans. These clothes suited the girl very much. The beauty had a good mood. On this day, she was in the mood to joke about Heather. "What is it?" said Sophia, and she poked Heather's backpack with a delicate finger. The girl looked timidly at the queen of the class. She did not understand what the angry beauty wanted from her. Sophia squeamishly poked her knapsack with her fingernail. "It's mud," she said, ringing and laughing. The other guys were laughing too. "That's not dirt," said Heather quietly. "There you go, mud. It's like dough." Sophia kept laughing. Her beautiful eyes were shining. The laughter was ringing. At that point, she was more beautiful than usual. "Bread dough." Steve laughed angrily. Everyone liked the joke so much that laughter filled the audience. Heather became worried and began to breathe heavily. She was depressed and hurt. Fred did not laugh with everyone, but did not stand up for the girl. When Heather began to suffocate, Sophia began to intimidate her. She stuck out her tongue and began to breathe loudly. The guys started to laugh even more. "Dough for muffin! Dough for muffin!" said Steve. The other guys started shouting that phrase too. Fred got a little confused. He was uncomfortable with the situation. Fred felt terrible for Bread, but could not stand up to the whole class. He thought he should have supported the poor girl, but he didn't know how to help her. Fred was scattered over the books on his desk. The girl got better. Soon the lessons began. Fred couldn't concentrate on the task. He thought Heather was mad at him. "She'll probably never talk to me again," the guy thought. He didn't know if it was good or bad. Sometimes he regretted getting so close to Muffin. Befriending an outcast girl robbed him of many joys. But he couldn't break up with her. Somehow she touched his heart. Muffin was very different from the other girls of that age. She was kind and understanding. She made him feel comfortable. Like the other boys at school, Fred liked Sophia very much, but something about Heather made her tender and made him want to take care of her. He didn't want to take care of Sophia. Fred sat the whole lesson and did not look at Heather, but at the end of the study, he felt her hand touch his elbow. "Fred, I've lost my pencil. Can you give me yours?" Heather whispered. A wave of relief came over Fred. He was happy that the girl had found a reason to talk to him. He gladly gave her a pencil and crossed her eyes. Heather was smiling. He wanted so much to do something for her, and soon he had an opportunity to do something good for her. Unfortunately, good intentions have come to naught. There was a lot of talk in class about Stephanie's party. A classmate was gathering guests at her house for the weekend. Her parents left town and let her daughter call her friends. Stephanie gave everyone a bright invitation card. Muffin and Fred got invited too. Heather was holding a colorful card. Fred heard the girl sigh. "Do you want to go?" he asked the neighbor with a smile. "No, of course," said Heather sadly. "Why?" said Fred. In his head, he scolded himself for asking. He understood that the gentle, shy girl with her appearance should not have come to the party. There were going Sophia, Emma, and Anna. These are real sharks that could hurt vulnerable Heather. At the same time, Fred understood how much she wanted to have fun. After all, this has never happened in her life. Perhaps she wanted to wear a beautiful dress and have fun with friends. She just did not have any good friends, and she deserved fun and some friends. "Come with me," Fred asked the girl, looking into her eyes. Heather's cheeks were covered with blush. She looked at the boy with huge, colorless eyes, with wonder and hope. At that moment, she was almost beautiful, but after a second, the hope in her eyes disappeared. The girl mentally returned to reality. "Thanks, Fred. I'm not going." said Heather, pretending to read. The boy felt a strong desire to make the girl happy. He thought that if Heather came to this party, the guys would see her qualities. They would appreciate her kindness and sincerity. He determined to help Heather. "You're coming with me, and it's out of the question," said Fred firmly. And then he added, "I want you to wear the most beautiful dress. Do you have one?" "Yes, actually," said Heather with a happy smile. Sometimes she was invited to holidays, but when she refused, no one insisted or talked her into it. On that day, Stephanie Adams' house was full of young guests. Loud music was playing. Sophia came in a bright green dress. It was very shining in her emerald eyes. The figure of the girl was great. The guys looked at her shapes with lust, but she did not pay attention to anyone. Sophia had a clear plan to get close to Fred. She was sure that the obstacle to their love was Heather. He spent so much time with an unattractive, ugly, pitty girl from a pitiful school. There was simply no way to communicate with Fred without her in class. Today is a great chance because there will be no ugly muffin next to him, thought Sophia. She was beautiful today. Sophia was sure that Fred would come. He was a little late. The guys were all gathered and making a lot of noise. Sophia looked at the door. She was waiting for Fred. No one was expecting what happened next. Amid the fun, Fred entered the house. He was wearing a suit that suited him very well. He was holding Heather's hand. All the guys looked at the strange couple with surprise. The muffin looked strange. The dress was beautiful, but not very good for a total girl. The makeup was not on her. Her hair was neat and attractive, but colorless. Heather smiled affably. Her smile was timid. Stephanie was surprised but invited the guests to join the company. The first half hour was good. Everyone continued to do their business. At first, no one noticed the queen of Sophia's class was in a bad mood. Fred never left her side, serving her drinks and sandwiches. He even tried to involve a shy girl in the conversation. It was time to dance. Fred was going to invite Heather, but Sophia was cleverly ahead of him. She went up to the guy and asked him to dance. Heather nodded timidly. The whole dance, Sophia snuggled up to the boy. He liked her. He didn't want to turn into a timid admirer of the entourage of the recognized queen. Fred mentally noted how beautiful Sophia was today. She was so temptingly snuggled up to him. He did not notice that the dance was over and the next song began. In the second slow song, he danced with beautiful Sophia. At the end of the second dance, he thought he did not want to return to Heather. He even regretted taking her with him on such a day. She prevented him from having fun with her presence. He could dance and have fun with the beautiful Sophia. Instead, he had to take care of Heather. Fred apologized to Sophia and went to Heather. Steve approached the beauty. He had long been in love with Sophia, but resentful, Sophia pushed the guy away. "Can't you see that your Fred is stuck to a muffin? He doesn't want you," he said to Sophia. This was the humiliation the girl could not stand. Sophia jumped up to Heather and yanked her arm, screaming, "Why did you come to this party? You were not expected here. You are an ugly, stupid creature." All the guys began to look at what would happen next. Heather looked at the furious beauty. Sophia continued, "You're ruining everyone's life. Scary people like you should stay at home and not go to cool parties." Heather got excited. She started to breathe heavily. Fred helped her take the medication to help her live. He gave her the tube. All the guys were looking at him. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't respond to Sophia rudely. He didn't want to take care of Heather anymore. She was really in his way. She was a stranger at the party. But Fred wasn't mad at himself for bringing a girl with him. He was angry with her. She was breathing so severely, her ugliness didn't even save a beautiful dress. Heather's breath was back to normal. What happened next surprised everyone. Heather got up, looked at everyone with colorless eyes, and said quietly, "You're all evil, cruel people here. I came here only because of Fred. He is the only kind and noble man among you. I will leave, and he will leave with me. I am happy at your school because I met this guy. He is not like you. When we graduate, he will be married and have many beautiful, intelligent, kind children." At first, they listened to her in silence, but at the end of her speech there was laughter. Sophia burst out. Her laughter was loud and contagious. Then Steve and Stephanie and the other guys started laughing. Fred was silent. The guys weren't just laughing at Heather, they were teasing him too. They mocked him because of Muffin. Fred jumped up and yelled at Heather, "Shut up! Shut up! You are a stupid, disgusting creature. Shut up! I only brought you here because I felt sorry for you. Look at you. You're ugly and stupid." Heather fell silent in fear. Then her breathing became uneven again. She was helping herself breathe the drug, but it was no longer helping. The girl began to suffocate. At first, everyone laughed at her situation. The shortness of breath of a fat girl looked funny. Someone even mimicked her. Emma was the first to notice that Heather had become quite ill. She called the ambulance. An emergency came quickly, but the girl was already unconscious. Heather was taken away to hospital. No one knew what happened next with Heather. The next day, she didn't come to school. She didn't go to school with the guys anymore. No one even talked about Muffin anymore. It became taboo. All the guys understood they were involved in something terrible. The years passed, and everyone slowly forgot about the colorless girl. Fred and Sophia became a couple. After graduation, they married. Sophia was a demanding girl, and her young husband did not have enough money for her desires. She constantly talked about him finding a job. The relationship between the couple was not always perfect. The young wife was scandalous and capricious. Soon, Sophia came home with flaming eyes. The prestigious company was recruiting young employees. Sophia forced Fred to submit his resume. The girl sent her resume too. Working in a prestigious company was very well paid. If they could both get a job at the office of this organization, they could buy a house right away. Unfortunately, no one replied to their CVs. Sophia wrote letters to the organization, but the company sent them a polite refusal. After a month, a persistent girl still managed to get a meeting with the head of the company. Sophia was convinced that she and Fred were skilled professionals. She believed that ordinary people were mistakenly refusing them. At the interview, Sophia and Fred came together. The organization was located in a beautiful building with modern renovations. The guys were taken to a luxurious office to the head. A beautiful young woman in an elegant costume offered Fred and Sophia a gesture to sit down. Something subtly familiar was on her face. "My name is Heather Donnelly. I am listening to you," said the lady. The name also seemed familiar to the guys. Sophia immediately presented the documents and began to tell the company director about their capabilities. She spoke for herself and her husband. Fred was silent. Sophia said a lot. Heather Donnelly listened to her attentively. "Why are you so silent?" said Fred's lady with a smile. With that smile, she turned everything upside down on him. He recognized Muffin. But how did she change? She became subtle, graceful. It was an impossible change for her. The face was hers, but at the same time completely different. She had a lovely look with expressive blue eyes. Her hair was blonde in a sharp bundle. Fred was struggling to breathe. Heather Donnelly asked anxiously, "Are you all right, Mr. Crane? Are you having trouble breathing? Should I call our doctor?" Fred shook his head negatively. His breathing was still heavy. Sophia was displeased that her husband looked so ridiculous at the time. "I had an asthma medication with me years ago, but I don't need it anymore. So if it's hard for you, I can call our doctor. Unfortunately, I don't have any medicine with me," the manager continued. Fred refused help. He was distraught. He remembered everything. He remembered the naive, ugly Muffin. He remembered how Sophia was torturing her. He remembered betraying a quiet, humble girl. "Heather," he whispered. The wife glanced at Fred angrily, and at that moment, she also got struck. Sophia's face turned red. "Muffin," she whispered. Heather smiled with restraint. "Yes, we know each other, and now, unfortunately, we do not need specialists for your profile. Our staff is already sufficiently staffed. We hired employees with higher qualifications, but you were so persistent, I can only offer you a position of service staff. But I think you will decline." Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. "Of course we won't take it," she roared. She was a qualified professional. Heather dared offer her the role of a maid, cleaner, or dishwasher. Sophia jumped out of her chair and ran to the exit. She gestured to Fred. Before leaving, Fred met Heather's light blue eyes. Her gaze expressed pity. There was no past resentment or anger in that look. But there was no longer the trust that Fred had in her many years ago. She forgave the betrayal. Fred was struck with terrible remorse. The couple was driving home in a taxi. Sophia hissed angrily at her husband. She was furious that a former classmate had done this to them. She was even angrier that Muffin had become successful and beautiful. She even thought that Fred's feelings for Heather had been awakened. And Fred rode in silence. His soul was tormented with remorse. He saw and remembered those blue eyes. He knew he would never forget them again. And Fred knew he'd never be able to look at his wife with love again.